An echo of the Nazi and anti-Semitic past sets off fear and anger in Europe. Protests sweep the continent. The U.S. and allies hit back as a former fan of Hitler gains power in Austria. Help wanted. The U.S. economy creates more jobs, putting unemployment at a 30-year low. And Alaska digs out from under an avalanche disaster.
This is the CBS Evening News. With Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. The United States and Europe have joined tonight to make a political outcast of Austria, imposing political sanctions only hours after Austria installed a new elected government. That government includes a well-financed party whose controversial leader has praised Adolf Hitler. The U.S. called its ambassador home for, quote, consultations. In Vienna, thousands demonstrated against their new leadership. CBS's Mark Phillips is there.
However distasteful they found it, however vehemently they attacked it, demonstrators at the presidential palace in Vienna today could not alter the course of history. Inside, members of the far-right Freedom Party were being sworn into a new government, but reluctantly by Austrian President Thomas Klestel, who said he too found the anti-immigration, ultra-nationalist sentiments of the party unpalatable. The man at the center of the crisis, party leader Jörg Haider, won't be in the government himself, but will still call the tune from his provincial stronghold. It's Haider's inflammatory remarks, belittling Nazi atrocities and supporting some of Hitler's policies that continue to cause deep concern no matter how often he disavows them, as he did again in this exclusive interview.
Democracy has to accept a politician who says, I am sure once during 20 years I have made some mistakes, I regret for it.
But Haider's opponents doubt his conversion, as do European governments which are still threatening sanctions. Israel also withdrew its ambassador today in protest.
Austrian politics, like the demonstrations here, have gotten ugly, under siege both internationally and at home. And Jörg Haider, once a figure on the rump of Austrian affairs, is now the tail wagging the dog of politics here and across Europe.
Even away from the demonstrations, there's anger and fear.
It's a shame, sorry, yes.
You feel ashamed?
Yeah, it's hurting, yes.
I'm petrified.
Why so?
I tell you, because I was here in '38, and for me it's a parallel situation.
A special prayer service for Austria was held tonight. Some of the minorities which Jörg Haider and his party find so unwelcome may have been saying a little prayer for themselves. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Vienna.
The other 14 member states of the European Union took immediate steps against Austria. In some places, the European Union flag was lowered to half-staff. Other examples, Finland suspended all government contacts with Austria. Portugal's president canceled a state visit. In Belgium, schools canceled ski trips to Austria, and a museum refused to lend a famous painting. France put off a defense meeting, but France's own far-right extremist, Jean-Marie Le Pen, called the sanctions against Austria revolting. Germany froze political contacts, saying, quote, forces hostile to Europe are now part of Austria's government. With its own political establishment shaken by a payoff corruption scandal, Germany is concerned about its own growing fringe movements, including some neo-Nazis. An editor's note here: for context and perspective, it is important to note that neo-Nazism and fascist-inclined movements are not engulfing even Austria, much less Europe as a whole. What's happening is that concern about the growing seeds of such movements has deepened. In the Persian Gulf tonight, a confrontation at sea and a new test of U.S.-Russian relations. A U.S. Navy warship has commandeered a Russian tanker carrying what the U.S. suspects is contraband oil from Iraq. Russia insists the oil is from Iran and is demanding the tanker's immediate release. CBS's national security correspondent David Martin is tracking this tense situation in the making.
2 days after Navy SEALs boarded the Russian oil tanker at gunpoint, the Navy continues to detain the ship, waiting for lab tests to confirm that the oil in her tanks was smuggled out of Iraq in violation of UN sanctions. U.S. officials say they had been tracking the ship for 30 days as it made repeated trips to pick up oil at an Iraqi refinery and then smuggle it out of the Gulf by staying inside Iranian territorial waters where it could not be intercepted by U.S. Navy ships. Finally, on Wednesday, the Navy cruiser Monterey caught the tanker in international waters. When the Russian ship refused to halt, the Monterey sent a team of 20 SEALs in by helicopter with weapons ready. The ship's crew claimed they had picked up their cargo not in Iraq but in Iran and produced charts and logs to back up their story. But a printout of the computerized navigation system showed the ship had been in Iraq. The U.S. Navy boards hundreds of ships each year searching for illegal goods coming out of Iraq. This is not the first time a Russian ship has been boarded, but this one appeared to be making as many trips as possible to take advantage of the rising price of oil. If lab tests confirm that the oil came from an Iraqi refinery, the ship's cargo will be confiscated. In the meantime, the U.S. has increased the number of ships enforcing the sanctions against Iraq. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The year 2000 began with a surge for the U.S. economy, the best job market in a generation. On the CBS Market Watch, employers added nearly 400,000 jobs in January, bringing unemployment down to an even 4%. That's the lowest since 1970. Jobs for African and Hispanic Americans are at an all-time high. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 49 points today, but high-tech stocks lifted the NASDAQ by 33 to yet another new record. CBS's Anthony Mason is following the story of the U.S. economy and jobs on a record roll.
The unstoppable buzzsaw called the U.S. economy rolled on last month as the construction industry added 116,000 new jobs, its largest monthly gain in 15 years. Even manufacturing, which laid off 250,000 workers last year, added 13,000 jobs in January.
This economy is supercharged. It is creating jobs at a pace nobody really expected.
High technology continues to lead the way at the Computer Career Training Center in Englewood, New Jersey.
Just make sure you understand.
Owner Annette Jones says she can't turn out graduates fast enough.
If you are trained, even partially trained in computers, you can get a job.
And the employers are asking for anybody?
They're hiring children. And they don't care whether they're white, black, Jew, Gentile, Protestant, or Catholic. Do you know this? And that's the truth. That's the truth.
Riding that technology boom, unemployment, which approached 8% in the early 90s, has now been cut in half and may be headed further south.
It certainly looks like 3.8% employment is on the horizon.
But employment analyst John Challenger says that won't make Alan Greenspan happy. This week, the Fed chairman raised interest rates again to slow the economy before inflation accelerates.
These numbers are the kinds of ones that say this economy is not ready to stop or slow down, and he's going to have to take further corrective action.
So you can bank on another interest rate hike next month. The strength of these numbers surprised most of the experts who keep wondering when this incredible economy is going to run out of workers. Dan?
Anthony Mason, thanks. In the presidential campaign, all the candidates claim to have the best plan to keep the economy chugging. The Democrats hit this theme especially heavily. Also today on the Republican side, the McCain camp is raising Cain and making gains, leaving the Bush people scrambling in two fast-approaching primary battleground states. CBS's Byron Pitts reports on both.
John McCain may be looking for a victory in South Carolina, but today he got a win in New York. A federal judge ruled McCain must be placed on the New York State primary ballot. It's a move Bush supporters had blocked for weeks. Meantime, the Texas governor took a shot of his own, calling McCain what in these parts is considered a dirty name, a Washington insider.
I believe that when you're a committee chairman on the Commerce Committee, one is capable of finding people to fly you on the airplanes and very capable of using that position to raise money.
In all due respect, I think it's beginning to show a little sign of desperation in the Bush campaign.
If nothing else, it's a sign this race is about to get nasty, as the latest polls show Bush and McCain virtually in a dead heat in South Carolina. So now the wounded frontrunner must push every button to draw in conservatives, while the underdog is pulling out an old label of his own, Reagan Democrats.
I'm doing exactly what Ronald Reagan did in 1980.
While McCain may be enjoying the ride, the Arizona senator says he is clear this momentum may not last. The South Carolina primary is still 14 days away. And in politics, 14 days can be a lifetime.
A lifetime filled with sharp jabs from both contenders in a fight that once looked like a blowout, but may turn into a brawl. Byron Pitts, CBS News, Florence, South Carolina.
Still to come on the CBS Evening News, snow on snow in Alaska. Thousands trapped by the worst avalanche in nearly 100 years. And a tragedy becomes a crisis for a city where a black police officer was shot and killed by white cops. There is late information tonight from the investigation into Monday's crash of Alaska Airlines Flight 261 into the Pacific off California. CBS's Bob Orr has the details. Bob?
Dan, there's new evidence tonight from the jet's cockpit voice recorder suggesting that something in the tail of the airplane may have broken in the moments just before the plane went down. After the pilots reported a problem with the horizontal stabilizer, the jet went into a quick dive. It took pilots about a minute and a half to regain control, and the jet leveled out. But soon after that, a flight attendant reported hearing a loud noise in the tail area. A short time later, and just 1 minute before the crash, the cockpit tape then picked up a second loud noise. The jet tumbled out of control. It's important to note at this point we don't know what the loud noises were, but one senior investigator has offered one theory. Perhaps the screw or the mechanical parts that moved the stabilizer may have broken. I have to point out also there's nothing at this moment that indicates an explosion. Dan?
Bob Orr. On the CBS Weather Watch, a break in the weather today for crews trying to reopen Alaska's only highway from Anchorage to the Kenai Peninsula. Travelers and residents have been stranded by a string of avalanches, Alaska's worst in decades. CBS's Jerry Bowen has been digging up the facts and has the pictures on the Alaska avalanches.
Even by Alaska standards, it's been a tough winter. 3 feet of snow on the ground, 4 times normal, and the worst avalanches in nearly a century have trapped thousands of residents and tourists alike south of Anchorage. 2 people have been killed, including a maintenance worker, swept away with his bulldozer by a massive snowslide.
We also had a bad run-in with an avalanche that pushed our car over within 2 feet of the guardrail on the way back, so that was pretty harrowing.
Medical supplies have been airlifted to several communities, including the ski town of Girdwood, 40 miles south of Anchorage, where people have been isolated for 5 days, some without electrical power.
Some folks have wood stoves, other people don't, so the folks with wood-burning stoves are taking people into their residences.
But there's no liquor. Dave Merrigan was last in line when state troopers cut off alcohol sales.
The last beer in Girdwood, they just shut down all the liquor stores. Looks like we might be going into a state of emergency pretty quick, and they probably don't want to have to deal with an alcohol issue if things get nasty, so.
Things did get nasty in Cordova on Prince William Sound. Nearly $3 million in damage and 1 death due to an avalanche that felled 90-year-old trees.
The whole face is going. Oh my God.
But unlike this avalanche last year that killed 6 snowmobilers in a remote area, this year's series of slides is hitting main roads and nearby towns, and the avalanche danger remains high, with another major storm forecast to move through on Sunday. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
CBS Ahead. Eye on America investigates a tragedy in Blue. Was it an accident or a racist act that killed a black policeman? The governor of Rhode Island today asked Attorney General Reno to investigate a shooting that has shaken the city of Providence. When the bullets stopped flying, 1 black police officer was dead and 2 white colleagues under investigation. And a top Providence cop faced a tragic quandary, as CBS's Jim Axelrod reports in tonight's Eye on America.
It was 0 with the wind chill when 3,000 police officers came to Providence, Rhode Island this week to bury one of their own, a young black cop named Cornell Young Jr.
Rest in peace, my son.
Cornell Young died doing his job here in this diner parking lot last Friday, where a man sat in his car waving a pistol. 2 uniformed officers arrive yelling, "Drop the gun." Officer Young, off duty, in plain clothes, runs out of the diner pointing his gun at the suspect. The 2 officers, both white, don't recognize Young. They reportedly order him to drop his weapon. When he doesn't, they open fire. It is unclear if Young identified himself as a cop. It was perhaps most painful for the city's highest-ranking African-American policeman, Major Cornell Young Sr., a cop and a father who might find himself torn between loyalty to his force and getting justice for his son.
I'm a law enforcement officer. I have to have confidence in law enforcement. So I want to find out what happened to my son. And anybody, anywhere that can help me do that, that's fine with me.
In Providence, they're now learning what people in too many other American cities have already found out. When you bury an officer killed on the job, it's heartbreaking. When he's killed by a fellow policeman, it's somehow even more cruel. But when a black cop is killed by a white cop, accident or not, it's no longer just about grief. Now, it's about race. In Providence, the lines were drawn before the facts were in, with many convinced that two white cops simply saw a black man with a gun and started shooting.
They just said they felt he was assassinated. That's the
Assassinated?
Assassinated. Yeah.
It's a powerful word.
Yes, it is, isn't it so?
And the mayor drew some quick conclusions of his own.
I don't think this is about race. I think this is about guns.
Although later, he seemed more willing to reserve judgment and wait for the state's investigation.
And does race have something to do with it? I don't know. But certainly we want to find out.
But it's hard to hear when everyone's yelling.
The results, that's it.
Tonight, the father whose words could sway a city is speaking softly.
If you knew my son, you know he wouldn't want this city torn apart because of him.
But as the air of solemn respect fades, a cold wind of divisiveness is blowing in to replace it. In Providence, Rhode Island, this is Jim Axelrod for Eye on America.
Up next on the CBS Evening News, the downside of full employment, lousy service, and angry customers. Earlier, we reported about America's record-breaking economic boom and unemployment at a 30-year low. It's great for job seekers and people who've been out of work, but it can also spawn problems for managers and consumers. Ray Brady reports on who gets pinched when the economy outgrows a high-quality workforce.
At America's restaurants, they're feeling those low unemployment numbers. Waiters, waitresses, even chefs are hard to find. And there's an added price. Consumers are feeling the shortage too. Ask Mike McConnell. He and his family waited for over an hour at TGI Fridays in St. Louis.
No one telling us anything, just telling us we're going to seat you, we're going to seat you, we're going to seat you, and then
no seats.
No seats.
We were understaffed that night in the restaurant. The manager, it sounds like, was overwhelmed.
Wallace Dooling runs TGI Fridays. His company gave McConnell 3 free dinner coupons. Company policy when people are legitimately dissatisfied with the service.
It is more difficult to attract people to our industry to work because in a tight labor market, there are a lot of other jobs. Yes, it is hard. No, it's very hard.
But consumers don't care about the worker shortage. They want service.
Managers and the clerks and salespeople don't understand customer service, don't understand what this is doing to their reputation and to their business.
McConnell, a book editor, makes sure they understand. He writes letters of complaint or even calls the heads of companies.
And how many businesses do you think you've taken on?
100, maybe 150.
Including some really big names.
Sears, CompUSA, Dillard's, Holiday Inn, Mattel.
Mike McConnell's not alone. The latest Better Business Bureau figures show a startling jump to a record 2.75 million complaints about shoddy products or poor service.
You're playing hardball.
Yes, you can either be a pushover or you can be pushy. And I've decided to be pushy.
And even more Americans may be getting pushy, as the other side of those low unemployment numbers, the lack of competent help, keeps hitting home. Ray Brady, CBS News, St. Louis.
There's news about smoking and the young on tonight's CBS Health Watch. President Clinton is now proposing still more taxes on cigarettes and a $3,000 fine on cigarette makers for every smoker under 18, unless underage smoking is cut in half by the year 2000. Given the heavy lobbying in Congress, it's widespread thought in Washington that will not get very far. Up next on CBS, the chilling truth about what the weather guys all call the wind chill factor. We end this week with cold, hard facts about an old chestnut of winter weather forecasting, the wind chill factor. You know, that index that claims the temperature plus wind make it feel like a gazillion below zero. Well, a mechanical engineering professor in Indiana says those wind chills come from 50-year-old military tests that measured how fast cans of water froze in Antarctica, not on how cold the air feels on human skin. Professor Maurice Bluestein says his wind chill index would try to calculate how cold it really feels to someone wearing a hat, gloves, and heavy jacket. Other people have a simpler formula. When it feels cold, it is cold. That's part of our world this Friday. Sunday, the New York Senate race and campaign 2000 are Bob Schieffer's subjects on Face the Nation. And now here's Ed Bradley with a look ahead at Sunday's 60 Minutes.
Was it because this American is a religious Jew sympathetic to Israel that the CIA fired him as a security risk? Plus, why in the world would a place out of this world invite television into its Shangri-La? Tune in and see for yourself Sunday.
For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good night and have a great weekend.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.